When Dan and I started dating many years ago, one of the things that we bonded over right away was our love of traveling. We loved going camping and road tripping. I remember there were times when one of us would get in the car and be like, you know where I'd really like to go? I'd like to go to Utah, or I'd love to go to Big Sur, and we would just hit the road and go. When we decided to start a family, we simply assumed that we would pass on that love of traveling to our children. And it didn't happen right away, but we talked about it constantly. And one thing Dan always told me was that he really wanted to have a pop-up camper one day. So I did some work earlier this year, saved up some money, and on Father's Day, I decided to surprise him with our pop-up camper. And since Danny's birthday was coming up the following month, we decided that it was the perfect opportunity to plan our camping trip. So we planned a 10-day trip up the central coast of California, and in this video, I wanted to share how I went about planning that. So first of all, my favorite way to stay organized when planning our camping trips is to put all of my favorite sites and apps into one folder on my phone so I can easily open that up and decide how we're going to go about this. So for the first trip, we decided to stay in Malibu, and I used probably the most traditional form of booking a camping spot, which is going through the government agency. For this instance, I used reservecalifornia.com because we chose to stay in Malibu. So this gives you the price, all the details, very standard. And although I have used this way of reserving camp spots a ton in the past, we had actually never stayed in Malibu before. And it was kind of just like a stop on our way to the Central Coast. But we were pleasantly surprised because even though we just spent one night there, we were able to do a ton of walking. We saw a family of deer. There was a cute little creek alongside it. So it was a really refreshing stop for us. And then now I'm going to get to my favorite way of planning a camping trip, which is Hipcamp. And if you're not familiar with Hipcamp, this is a way, it's kind of like an Airbnb, but for camp spots. So these are all private pieces of land that people will rent out. So since we were going to the area of Avila Beach, I typed that in, and as you can see, there's like a ton of interesting places to stay, which is really our thing. You can stay in tiny little campers, you can stay on farms. So what we decided on was this beautiful apple orchard. It's right here, Sea Canyon Fruit Ranch. They actually host weddings there. They do apple picking during the fall. But during the rest of the year, they just basically let you set up in the middle of their apple orchard. And this was $65 a night, which I think is a really great price because there was so much privacy. So as you can see here, we're popping up our camper. We're right in the middle of the orchard. The kids are just kind of running around. There was actually an area for them to play. So that was probably my favorite part about this location. It was very child friendly. There was also a family of deer that was living on the property, and every now and then they would just grace us with their presence, and the kids just got such a kick out of that. And for this location, although it seems like it's in the middle of nowhere, there's like a mountain right behind it, you see nothing around. It is actually super close to so many things, and one of my favorite things that it was close to is this place called Avila Valley Barn. It was about 10 minutes away. They have a U-Pick flower garden, and they also have this big field right here where the kids were able to pick their own raspberries. And I can absolutely 100% tell you this was their favorite part of the entire trip. Just walking through it, picking off their own raspberries, and probably eating too many of them, but they just had the time of their life.
Let me see what you found. Hello. Delicious. So many.
It's a raspberry. Is it delicious? So at this farm, they also had a cute little produce stand where you could buy their already picked organic produce, fruits. There was pies. There was a restaurant on site. They had a petting zoo. There was just so much to do at this one place. So needless to say, we spent a lot of time in here and the kids just had a blast. Today's Danny's birthday, so you got to pick a pie.
Okay,
and we're gonna eat it. This beautiful view.
Yeah, they should be open right now. Yeah, the sweet shop and the deli.
Half a mile from our campsite, there was actually a winery. So Dan and I spent a little bit of time there. We were able to enjoy a glass of wine and the kids just ran around the vineyards. It was so much fun. About an hour away was Montaña de Oro State Park. We stopped here and spent some time at the beach, collecting pebbles and rocks. And it was actually one of the most beautiful beaches that I have ever been to. And I wish we could have spent more time here. I wish we would have gone sooner, but it was time to go. Wow. And finally, on our last stop up the Central Coast, we headed up to Watsonville. And for this stay, we actually used Airbnb. And you might be thinking that's kind of weird because this is a camping trip. But hear me out. Airbnb actually has some pretty cool spots. So what I like to do is I like to search the location and then I scroll all the way down to where it says unique stays, and this is totally our thing. So I click all the options that we are interested in, and we have ended up staying in some pretty cool places. So since this was the last stop on our trip, and because this was for Danny's birthday, I decided to splurge a little bit on this stay. So I ended up finding this adorable tent in the middle of the forest, hosted by Tentrr, which has campsites nationwide. It was $210, which is a lot more than we would normally spend on a campsite, but this is considered glamping, which, as you probably already know, stands for glamorous camping. So it was just gorgeous. It was one of the most beautiful places we have ever stayed at. It's not something that we would probably do very often, but in my opinion, worth the extra money. Being a little wild. Are you okay?
Rosie says she's not okay.
So one of the reasons that this costs a little bit more money is because you actually have the entire site to yourself. There are no other tents on site. And although it's pretty close to the road, it makes you feel like you are in a world of your own because you are completely surrounded by trees. You are alongside the creek. There are just these cute swings all over the place. There are hammocks. There's a fire pit, all sorts of stuff that you can do, like I said, all to yourself. Yeah, it's beautiful. Look at that. We are in the middle of the forest. Do you like it?
Huh? Yes.
Danny, do you want to give us a tour of our tent? Go ahead.
Okay. Yay!
This is our tent.
Yes, this is our tent.
Okay, you're taking a video. Good job.
And this is our bathroom, and this is our camping.
This is our bathroom. That's right. This is our view.
This is our trash can.
Oh. After we explored our tent and spent some time under the shade of the redwoods, we headed to the 17-mile drive. The 17-mile drive is considered one of the most scenic drives in the world, and it is a short distance from Watsonville, so we had to check it out with the kids. Along this ride, you will see some of the most beautiful beaches and beautiful views that you have ever seen. As you're driving along the route, there are certain markers to indicate points of interest, and one of the most popular ones is the lone cypress. The lone cypress is the most photographed tree in the world. Of course, we had to stop at the beach. And I don't know if this is always the case, but on this specific day, there was nobody else there. It was an introvert's dream, and we loved it. This was the last stop we made on our road trip up the Central Coast, and it was a perfect ending. When Dan and I first became parents, we didn't know very much. But we did know that we wanted to share our love of traveling and camping and exploring with our children. We thought that that would happen as soon as possible. We just wanted to get out there with our kids. But life doesn't always turn out the way you think it will. And sometimes your kid ends up getting car sick really easily, or they hate their car seat, or sometimes a pandemic hits and you're stuck at home. But we are finally getting to a place where we can start doing all those things that we had planned, and the kids are loving it. So as I looked back at them sleeping and I looked over at Dan, I almost had to do a double take because I couldn't believe that this is what we used to talk about. This was the dream, and we're actually living it.